Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and fellow councillors. This is a meeting of the council held in public. This is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned, but if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest exit, large screen in front of the room, proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it's safe to return, councillors receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it's safe to return to the meeting. We're recording this meeting this evening using our webcast system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so the meeting is not interrupted. There is no members of the public in attendance. So, right, apologies please.
Yes, we have Councillor Yacoub attending in place of Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. We have a block of 4 councillors, which includes myself, Councillor Myers, Councillor Adesheri, Councillor Lawrence for non-pecuniary regarding item 5. Anybody else got any interests? No? Right, go on to the minutes, please. Can we take a vote on the minutes held on the Thursday the 9th of November 23, please? Those in favour? Those abstained? That's it. Thank you. Right, now we'll go on to item 4. Quarter 3's overview of the people thing, please.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't propose to go through this in detail. Obviously, this is your normal quarter 3 report under the people theme, and that's at pages 19 through to 37. It's in a slightly different format in that the narrative, the commentary is underneath each of the sections, and that's pulling out some highlights, either exceptional performance or perhaps where it hasn't quite met the target. So I think probably the information is in the report, and I'm happy to take questions from members on any of those sections.
Does any members have any questions at this time? Or would you like a couple of minutes just to refresh your memories? Councillor Green?
Sorry. Page 33, where the outstanding issue on clarifying how the policy will be implemented. Is there any updates on that section? Oh, yeah, sorry. Outstanding issue on the clarifying how the policy will be implemented. Confirmation needed. We don't know if there's any updates on that.
Yeah, the update on that really is that obviously this is an overarching policy, but it doesn't require separate strategies because it basically covers, there are strategies covering each of those areas. So for example, we've got an enforcement policy, we've got an ASB policy, so it's picked up in part of that, so it was felt that it just didn't need its own strategy sitting underneath. Does that make sense?
Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, more of a statement than a question, Chair. It was just to say that feedback I've had from the facilities, page 31 of the report regarding the leisure, wellbeing and arts and the new play areas that are being rolled out. Just want to say that I've had some feedback from residents regarding Lake Meadows and how well used it is, and I know that I visited the site before it opened, and it was good to see the site being well used. I'd just like to thank all those that made it happen.
Has anybody else got any comments or questions on this item? Councillor Myers.
It was on a few of them really where we see some of the KPIs obviously having downwards arrows on a lot of the statistics and stuff, but I know there's a the December window things are closed and not things are open. So is that the explanation for a lot of the KPIs which are showing as decreased for that month from the previous 2 months because of the Christmas period.
Some of them potentially, if you wanted to draw my attention to specific ones, I could try and explain those. Yeah. I mean, quite often, I mean, it's not in here, but things like collection of any income always dips down in those months. But was there anything specific you were looking at?
A lot of them were to do with, so page 27, a lot of stuff to do with activity centres, the street tags throughout sort of October, November, and a big drop in December, and that kind of point. So I assume most activity centres are shut over that Christmas period, and that's why they're lower than what we would be expecting normally.
They would be shut for periods and that, but I'm going to look to my learned friend on the row behind because he'll be able to give you a more detailed explanation.
Yes, Councillor, you're absolutely right. The committees that run the various activity centres have a Christmas close down. We probably need to do a little bit of work on setting out the stats with regards to expectations during that period, because we always know that's going to happen. The street tag would be similar, really. I mean, you're talking about the coldest, wettest, darkest months. So in many ways, we do see a drop-off of people out there on the streets, kind of walking, cycling, and entering into the gamification stats. But I think when you think of how miserable the weather can be at this time, and there's still really strong numbers, people getting out and being active still. So yeah, thank you.
And there's one on page 29, one of the KPIs. Seems to have been an increase in the number of cases open after 4 weeks from approach on domestic abuse for the month of December. Just wondered if there was any particular highlights there and why we think that's particularly happening in that month and rather than the previous quarters, or 2 months rather.
I think traditionally with domestic abuse cases during the colder winter months and particularly around Christmas, you do find that the reports of domestic abuse will increase during that time, unfortunately, and there's quite a traditional trend where that would happen.
Yeah, that's very disappointing, isn't it? Generally, to see that kind of stat being, year on year. Okay, thank you. I have no other points to make on that.
Just one area I would like to highlight for praise, actually. It's going along, looking at our volunteering hours that worked across the borough, and I think it's only right with what else we've got to be discussed tonight, is looking, especially at the Towngate Theatre, the figures for volunteering are very high, right across the board, so I think we need to recognise the amount of work our volunteers do across the borough and note of thanks to them. So has anybody else got anything else on this subject? Right, we'll move on to item 5, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I'm pleased to be here today to talk about the performance over the last 3 years of our funding agreement with the Basildon and Billericay and Wickford Council for Voluntary Service, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Simon Johnson today, the Chief Operating Officer of the CVS, who's going to be here to help answer any questions that the committee may have or comments. As set out in the report, the Council have had a grant funding agreement with the CVS here in Basildon for many, many years, and we are just coming to the end of our most recent 3-year cycle, which ceases on the 31st of March 2024. Discussions are ongoing with the Cabinet member in relation to the possibility of future funding, but tonight we're specifically looking for that scrutiny angle to talk about the performance. So, for those that don't know, BBW CVS is an infrastructure organisation that help promote, develop and support the voluntary community sector in the Basildon Borough. So that's anything from some of our larger charities and community interest companies through to small community local activity by residents. They've been operating here, say, in the borough for many, many years and are a charity in their own right. When we were seeking authority for continuous funding last time we were here 3 years ago for this conversation, we entered into, alongside the CVS, a independent review, which we sought from a third party that was just really to help, I guess, the partnership, ourselves as funders and the other funders of the CVS, including Essex County Council and the like, as well, and the CVS themselves, with understanding kind of the strengths and perhaps areas for improvement. And we thought that was a particularly strong thing to do, to have that kind of system audit, I should say, as to kind of how we're progressing. I'm pleased to say that took place and identified a series of strengths in the CVS and work that they're doing well, but also perhaps some of the gaps where themselves as an organisation and ourselves as system partners, we could perhaps tighten that work and improve on it. Therefore, a recommendations report came from that, and that was pulled together following lots of engagement with the CVS staff, their trustees, as well as wider stakeholders in the voluntary community sector, including both those that are members of the infrastructure organisation and those that are not. It was a really interesting piece of work, therefore. Since that period, the communities team at the council have been working with Simon and his team in relation to being able to pull out how we're going to be able to collectively tackle much of those recommendations, which focus quite considerably, I guess, on the work of networking and building networks within the voluntary sector, enhancing the numbers of members that were in the voluntary sector that were joining the infrastructure body for that support and guidance, and how they were liaising and relating to them. This gave kind of a clearer understanding of the strategic ambitions and that commissioners and funders also would be seeking from them. I'm pleased to say that since the independent peer review, the CVS has developed an action plan to tackle the key challenges, and members will see that in enclosure number 1, there is the draft version of that, although I do understand that Simon's is progressing that with his trustees at the moment, and he'll be happy to speak and answer any questions on that. The second part of the report, therefore, talks about much of the performance of the CVS during that 3-year cycle, which there's some real positives in. You'll see from the report the number of new members is significantly higher this year to date compared to in previous years, which is particularly impressive, I think. And also the number of individual volunteer registrations is significantly higher than we've had in previous years. But of course, in the CVS are having the same challenges as all of us in regards to that important work with our communities and some of the challenges that are out there in our communities, and they're helping bridge some of those. So Simon and myself will happily answer any questions in relation to the performance or the peer review work. And I'll pass back over to you, Councillor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that report. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Yuku.
Thank you. On page 45, there is mention of mental health forums, and it says that 12 meetings have taken place and the attendance was generally low, and we were looking at possible solutions to tackle that. Can you provide some more details on that? And also, can you speak to the age range of those who did attend?
Hiya. This is particularly targeted at organisations that operate mental health provisions, and particularly Basildon operating ones as well. So the amount of local mental health organisations is reasonably low, and there's probably a couple more than what's been on that particular report. And it's quite a competitive area as well, as you'd probably expect over the last few years.
Councillor Kew.
Could you speak to the reasons for the low attendance and also the age range of those who have attended?
Right, so as it's organisations, the age range would probably not be so relevant. It's more about the organisations themselves being represented in that space. So we have around about 80% of the local mental health providers, ranging from Motivated Minds, Listening Post, Craig Tyler Trust, Renew Counselling. So there's always going to be a smaller figure in that space. It's about the organisations collaborating and connecting and trying to get the best outcomes for the wider community. So I think there's approximately it's around about 10 organisations that operate in our particular borough.
I was also going to say, so on that basis, the membership of the forum are representing both adult and children and adolescents in their membership. Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you. Hi, Simon again. On page 43, we can see sort of a successive number of new memberships. Is this, just quickly, is that the number of people or the number of new organisations that are coming in and signing up with you? It's not quite clear.
So that's the amount of organisations. Okay, so that would be one per organisation rather than individuals. So there's actually now 187 as of this week.
Right. I'm sorry, Councillor Myers.
Sorry, so that's really good news. So based on that, so 2022, 2023, you had 43, now you have 183, now you say 187. But if we move over to page 44 with the number of certified professional development courses provided, we can see the total number of users, but if there's been a dramatic increase in the number of organisations that have joined, it just seems to be the number of users who have been attending courses is 28 in the year so far, and the year before was 119, and the year before that 62. I just wondered your feedback on why that's the case.
Okay, so this was a unique opportunity basically with a training provider that provided online CPD courses, so that's things like health and safety, data protection and so on. And that really sort of covered a window. Unfortunately, that organisation doesn't operate anymore, so we'll be looking to find an alternative provider. And as you could assume, these are quite expensive. They're about £10–15 a course. So that's the only reason on the decline, is the fact that we can't offer the same offer basically.
Right, I've just got a very quick question, and again it's about the membership numbers, which have gone up from 28, 43 now to 187. What do you put that down to, please?
Okay, well I think what's happened there in the reporting is that they've done on increases, and that final figure is a total figure. So around 21-22, the figure was around about 130 members. So you can see there's a significant increase anyway, it's still impressive. What I put it down to, I think there's a lot more start-up groups that we've helped support. I think that our services have become a lot more aware with members. I think that we've performed better and formulated relationships when neighbours have been telling each other about what's going on and what we're particularly doing. We're trying to be quite, we're trying to work smarter rather than harder, I suppose, with the current financial pressures and so on. Our relationships with public bodies is far improved, which also helps us to access, a wider pool of members as well.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed the last agreement was in 2021, and I think people need to respect the fact that back then in 21 we were coming out of COVID, and lots of organisations have been affected. Lots of them have had to do resets, lots of them have not survived, lots of them have had to change the way they've worked. So I was surprised. I mean, I know that it was agreed to do a peer report, but it's a bit tough to do that kind of thing just straight after COVID and put pressure on the BBCVS to come up with full stats, because coming out of COVID, no one really knew where they were going as far as stats go. But my question is to Simon, and that is, apart from Basildon Council, where else do you get funding yourself, for the organisation?
So it varies. We currently have a contract with Essex County Council. We're currently working far more closely with the local NHS alliance, and then obviously alternative funders like the lottery and others across the country.
And I just want to obviously give a mention, of course, last year was the sector summit where all the voluntary organisations come together for a long time to be able to fly the flag for their organisations and network. And I understand that there's plans for another one this year. Is that right?
That's right. Unfortunately, I did suffer a heart attack earlier last year, which caused a bit of a delay because it's quite nice to be before that winter pressure period. But we are going to be hosting another one on the 20th of March. We recognise it made a significant difference. I think when you look at the sort of lone sort of monthly networking events and then what you can get in, you know, having that big key focus on a large scale event, it's obviously quite significantly larger. Thank you.
Councillor Shealy.
You get fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. So my question to you, Simon, is with this voluntary sector networking event that we've just been talking about, I'm not too sure, can organisations register to have a spot? I missed it last year, unfortunately, so I'm not too sure the actual setup because I haven't seen, as already declared, a member of the CVS, I haven't seen an invitation saying that organisations can have a pitch. Maybe that's not the purpose, but can you just clarify for me? And then I have one other question. Thank you.
Thank you. No, this is a sector summit, so the intention is that our members in the sector are more broadly the audience when we encourage commissioners and public bodies and other funding agencies to present what they've got to offer for the sector itself and help to formulate them relationships. Many organisations don't get the opportunity to speak to, say, for example, the local NHS and understand what their intentions are and how they can all contribute and help. And we found that this to be quite a successful concept, bringing lots of people to the table to be able to understand, you know, what we need to do to improve society. We have other events that we support which are about showcasing the sector. So we're very keen to support Mayfest, which has been historically a strong event. Rather than compete with our sector, we're here to complement our sector.
Thank you very much for that. And the last thing I want to say on this particular topic is I want to say well done because I know what the CVS was like before Simon took over, and there's a great change. And for that, I want to say thank you to you and your team for what you're doing for the community and for the community organisations. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very nice of you.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Adeshealy's comment, got it right. With the governance review that was taking place, do you feel like now that yourself and your leadership and are now in a better position as to where you were, say, 2021 when this was, Grant, correct me if I'm wrong, when this was commissioned? 2021? Yeah.
It's hard to say, isn't it? You know, some of these things kind of bring you, you know, relevant information to the forefront that you really want to act upon, and then, you know, it's quite challenging. But in general, yes, I believe it has done. It's helped us to make sure that we're, you know, standing side by side. Our priorities about Basden, Billericay and Wickford, and I think that's helped to achieve that. So yes.
And then just on the back of that, Grant mentioned that obviously this is in draft form and you have to get it approved by your trustees. Do you have any sort of timeline as to when that may be?
To be honest, what we intended to do is to work more closely with the Borough Council to ensure that, you know, we've took on board any suggestions, any sort of relevance for our particular communities. So our trustees have approved this draft form already. We just wanted to create that window to be able to influence, you know, more ambition or whatever that may be.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have a question. I just did want to make one statement. That in the 6.5 years that I've actually been here, I've never seen the BBW CVS have a greater presence out there in the wider care environment. There's almost hardly a meeting I go to that Simon isn't stuck in and depended on for being there. So whether that be the Basildon and Brentwood Health Alliance, the Basildon Dementia Action Alliance, or even the Midland South Essex Foundation Hospital Trust Council of Governors, they're there, they have a voice, and they're there to make a real impact. I think they're doing a great job, so I just wanted to throw that in. Thank you.
Again, it's very nice, thank you.
Councillor Sargent.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The council itself had a peer review several years ago, and we all know how that brought up some issues with us and how we took that all on board and became a better council. And I believe that exactly the same has happened with Simon and the CVS. As it's been mentioned, you know, we came out of COVID, there was a few issues, and Simon is working their way, and his trustees are working their way through that peer review. And I'd like to say also that what he is achieving from a council point of view, I think, from memory, if my memory serves me right, I think we're giving in grant funding about 25,000 a year, and from a council perspective, that's a small amount of money for a large amount of effort that we get from our CVS, and they are to be congratulated. And finally, on the summit, that really is a large event that attracts an enormous amount of people, and there is so much that they can find out. And as I always say, with volunteering, it's one of the hardest jobs. Most of us volunteer, us councillors, but the job of the CVS is to recruit, to try to put them in to help all of our wonderful organisations out there. So we have a lot to be thankful for, and I'm very pleased to find that we have an excellent CVS. So well done to you and your trustees, Simon. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment? I think, you know, obviously our primary role is about supporting our sector to be able to do the great work they do, but it's also about finding them gaps as well where society is suffering. And you may have seen that, you know, we've stepped into that space around bringing people together for asylum seekers and refugees, and I think our borough's seen a significant increase. This year alone we've dealt with 903 cases, and as you can imagine, for a CVS that doesn't really step into that space, that's quite a significant impact. Also with homelessness as well, there's been obviously some changes with pressures around homelessness, and you may all be aware that we're operating in the Basildon Emergency Night Shelter, and just in the first month alone we provided 336 beds for homeless people. That's quite a significant contribution to our borough. We want to make sure that no one gets, that less people can suffer essentially through consequences that perhaps they don't have control over. So as much as the primary objective of ours is to support the sector, we also want to make sure that those don't miss out as well. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments on this item? Right, well, I'll quickly finish off. I'll echo what most of my colleagues have said. I have been involved with the CVS as a member for many years before Simon and the team he's got now were there, and I've got to be honest, I've seen a marked improvement within the way they work, the way they reach out, and the amount of support. So I'd like to put my thanks on record, Simon, and the rest of your team and your trustees. The work you do is amazing, to join up and support the different volunteer groups we've got out in Basildon, which we're very fortunate as a borough to have a huge amount of all these organisations, and it's nice that we have got an umbrella organisation that kind of joins us all together and gives us the support we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's also a privilege to work with the people that I do as well. You may be aware that Rotary clubs have an award for particular boroughs. So we're very fortunate to work with Stuart Gibbs, who's been awarded sort of Mr Billericay, essentially, and Chris Lovell, who's also been awarded by Rotary as Mr Basden, essentially. So it's a privilege to work with the team that I've got, and you know, we couldn't do things to the extent that we do without them.
Thank you very much. Right, we will now move on to item 6, please.
Thank you, Councillor. As per the last item, I'm pleased to provide a similar report, but this time in relation to our colleagues at Basildon Community Transport Service, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Tina here, again as the Chief Officer, as well as other members of staff and trustees. So once again, I'll go through the report, but and hopefully we can, between us, all answer relevant questions. So Basildon Community Transport Service is a community transport provider for our communities, but also operates a number of other general services such as toenail cutting and the hiring of mobility equipment such as wheelchairs and the like. The council are again at the tail end of a 3-year funding cycle for Basildon Community Transport, with that ceasing on the 31st of March this coming year. And again, like the conversation about the CVS a moment ago, discussions are ongoing between relevant officers and the Cabinet member in relation to future funding. But of course, as I said a moment ago, bringing it to scrutiny to answer questions is a particularly healthy and helpful approach to supporting those conversations which are underway. The council currently has a funding agreement with for £50,000 a year for community transport itself, as well as an additional £26,000 for the general services I mentioned earlier. Although there was some work that took place last time in relation to the consumer price index and ensuring that it remained valid for that period of time. The performance report within the report is quite clear, and members will be able to see that the various different figures, although I must raise that Tina has raised with me tonight that some of the figures perhaps have not been, we've not quite caught up with the right number of figures this year with information in the handover. So I might pass over to you in a moment, Tina, just to identify what those are. I think that's in relation to changing staff within the service area, and it's to be understood. But yes, so if you wouldn't mind, I'll pass over to Tina now, who will just give a little bit of an update on those stats, and that will enable members to ask relevant questions. Thank you, Tina.
Okay, thank you. If you've got the performance data in front of you of BCTS, where it's got total number of passenger journeys made, there's been a bit of a miscommunication because we've been dealing with different officers due to our officer going on maternity leave. And what they've recorded is not the number of passenger journeys, but the number of trips. So if you work out if a trip, a minibus can carry either 12 people, 14 people, so it's not trips. So your actual number today is not 12,982, that's the number of trips. The number of passenger journeys, which is people travelling on the buses, is 23,550. So it does look very different if you're comparing it to the number of trips. For us, coming out of COVID was one of the hardest things going through COVID, but what it's showing us is the confidence of the residents to use our services, that they are coming back and there's a big demand for the service. So we're quite happy with those figures, and we think that we're hitting the best targets that we can. We do still have waiting lists, of which we've been working on the waiting list, and that the waiting list was quite long, and we've had a few challenges. You'll see a few issues going away, but we've worked on the waiting list now. We've managed to bring that down, so we're actually able now to offer more people the opportunity to use our services. One of the things that we've had big problems with is rodents. Also in the report, if you go to the challenges, they've marked down that we've spent 6,306 on repairs. That's not a true figure. We've actually spent 55,000 on our maintenance, but where the figure 6,300, I had a meeting with the officers, and at that stage we had spent 6,300 on rodents eating the wires of the vehicles. we're now up to £8,810. It's either rats. It started off in the spring, and it was the fox cubs. The foxes had some fox cubs, and the fox cubs quite like to come on the minibuses overnight. But if they chew the wiring looms, you only need those long wires to be chewed. You have to take the old vehicle apart to find the wires and to fix the wires. So the maintenance cost is high. We've been working with the officers and we haven't found a solution of how we go forward and where else we could park the vehicles or what else we can do to deter the rats. This week we thought that it may be seasonal. This week with our towel lift, I think we've had 2 buses. Is it 2 buses have gone down because they've chewed the wires on the towel lifts? So this is going to be an ongoing situation, and we currently don't have the answer. And we've looked at whether we could put wiring. We've looked at whether we could put some fencing down, but you know they've told us we can't do that because they dig under the fencing. So that's one of our biggest issues, and that's one of our biggest issues that's holding us back from providing more journeys. So if you schedule your journeys, you come in on the day, we don't just have spare buses that we can just swap and change. As an organisation, we know we've got some older fleet, and due to COVID and the economic crisis, we've had to wait a long time to get buses. We've had one on order for 2 years, another new one coming, and that's hopefully going to be here in May. We've also took delivery of some new buses, which has been really fantastic this year. So we're doing really well. We're doing our best, and we've got a great team. And the team's very supportive. The team's been with us for a number of years, and everybody actually wants to make this work. And the other challenge that we've suffered as an organisation, my team are fantastic, and they work because they've got the passion about community transport making a difference to quality of life. We don't have much funding. We do get funding from Essex County Council. We do get funding from yourselves, which we're really grateful for. But when the national minimum wage went up, we had to increase that to our staff. That cost us over £17,000 last year. This year, I've got to find another 9.8% to do the same. So we're struggling on where do we get this extra money from? How are we going to achieve that? But we are working closely with the CVS to see if we can get some grant funding, because there's capital and there's revenue funding, and it's not always available, and it's quite hard to actually source, but that is something that we're putting in place to see if we can find. I think that's about us. If you've got any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. The only question I had, you've already answered, which was again, you know, the figures to date. When I saw those, I was quite concerned, but you've put my mind to rest on that. Any other members have any questions? Councillor Myers.
Thank you. So you're saying that you've got an issue with vermin and rodents for your current buses. Where are they currently stored?
The vehicles are parked at the George Hurd Centre at the back. Our office is at the George Hurd Centre, so it's the lock-up at the back. You've got like a football field there, haven't you? So you've got the fields at the side as well. And the security, the fact that the gates are locked, gives us the security that the vehicles are not vandalised, because a few years ago people had taken the catalytic converters and lots of vehicles being vandalised and stolen. So at least in a locked up area, that's a good place to park your vehicles. Just need to move the rodents.
So I suppose there's a question for officers now. Is there not another suitable location to store the vehicles if there is a rodent problem that's ongoing and costing a lot of money?
I mean, there's something we can talk to about whether I think understanding from Tina and the team, it's whether it would be suitable to have the buses away from their office space where their volunteers are. That would be the difficulty, I would think. But yeah, whether there are other opportunities around depots, etc., we could do so. I would need to speak to colleagues, but I'm not quite certain on the suitability of that, if I'm honest with you.
I think if we move to the location, the office is there, the buses are parked there. If you move us too far away, you're going to get a number of dead miles that's going to cost the system. It's going to cost us just as much to cover those dead miles. It's the convenience that the office and the buses all work. If we have to change them, if a bus goes down, it just works at the moment.
So are the problems you've been facing at the moment mainly to do with your older buses? Are you having problems with your newer buses?
They tube wires on all buses.
I'm not sure whether officers are dealing with this already, but can we task officers to have a look and see whether there's anything we can do to help support them with some way of stopping, whether it's traps or whether it's changing the fencing or something, please. Anybody else got any questions on this? Councillor Green.
Actually, just a comment, because we've had exactly the same, and a lot of people I've spoken to, with our van, had to have it resoldered, rewired. It's a Sawyer, I think, or something in the wiring, but yeah, so it's something they like, yeah. So what we've done, we had to have it all soldered, and I know welding is really a lot of money to get all the wiring redone. So what we do now, we put plastic crate underneath and a brick to stop the fox from going underneath again. So, but I don't think that's something that we can try. Yeah, unless as long as you remember to remove the crate and the brick when you're driving. Anyway, just a comment. Okay, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of work done to try to try to solve this over a period of time. Obviously, very difficult with foxes because they're quite understandably they're protected quite rightly. Rats is slightly different, but there has been baiting. Unfortunately, it's the natural environment. So I think any ideas like Councillor Green just come up with there that we can try to do different things is going to be helpful. But it's an ongoing issue where one step forward, two steps back, and or vice versa at times, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've heard of local schools that have had the same problem with their minibuses on their field. So anyway, Councillor Coope.
I think we're all in agreement that we need better solutions for this because spending £55,000 on maintenance is a lot of money. I wanted to look at the wheelchair loan scheme. I've seen here that it says that there are 65 active wheelchairs available for hire, but 40% of the stock is being used. So is there more that we can do in order to advertise this service and increase the uptake?
At the moment, we meet all the uptake if anybody comes to us, and sometimes it's seasonal if people are coming for families or school holidays, different times that there's there, so we always have enough. Yeah, I mean, if you could promote the service, I mean, we promote the service on our Facebook, our website, all those things, but if you feel there's a tool that we could use to promote it more, that would be beneficial for everybody. Because we're one of the, I mean, to be honest, if people only pay a deposit for those wheelchairs, they don't pay to hire the wheelchair. They pay the deposit and they get their deposit back once they return their wheelchair. So if you was going through other agencies, it would be a bigger expense. So any tool you can use to advertise the service would be brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Question on that, I suppose, is that because of the average age of the people who's going to be using these wheelchairs in your services, do you feel like that using Facebook and the internet is the best way forward? Because perhaps a suggestion would be, because where you normally drop these people off at community centres and things like that, worthwhile putting up posters there where they can see them. Would that be a better idea going forwards?
We have posters up, and we also, along with our toenail cutting service, we promote it. So we've got leaflets of our toenail cutting service. You've got the wheelchair information on the back. Those leaflets go out to regular places. But we also do children. It's not just the elderly that have the wheelchairs.
Does anybody else have any other questions on this item? No. Right, thank you very much. Thank you for coming along tonight and this report. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 7.
Sorry, Councillor, just getting onto the next page. So a change in tact, a different type of report now. Very grateful to be given the opportunity to come today alongside Jim Sims, our Head of Economic Development, to talk about a joint piece of work for a new strategy, the first initial inaugural, I should say, culture and creative industry strategy that the council have pulled together. The strategy looks to build on work that's been undertaken through the council, but also very much through our communities, local businesses and organisations that Simon and his team will even support in the cultural industries and creative sector to help build the strength in the area and set out a series of strategic aims and objectives to enhance this really important sector that provides not only employment and opportunities and skills for our residents, but also many of the things that they find particularly engaging and bring joy to their lives. The benefits of creative and cultural activities are clear and obvious to all of the committee, I'm absolutely sure. But this will be the first time that we're actually going to have a strategy that would actually help drive the council's ambitions for working in partnership and delivering itself, working alongside our Arts Council England colleagues, Creative Estuary and many other partners that are operating in this space to improve lives and enhance skills and opportunities. And we've got a particular focus through the work that we were asked to do here, specifically looking at Basildon Town Centre and the opportunities that brings with regards to driving greater footfall, greater dwell time and supporting our local retail and business offer in the town centre. Now, I must say that this strategy starts off at that point, but it obviously looks to tail off and also influence all other town centres around the borough, and also generally improving opportunities for residents to participate in culture and creative industries offer, but also to support those of our residents that either do this as a business or for their own leisure time. It's a very varied and wide strategy, draft strategy, I should say, that encompasses many different areas of ourselves as an organisation, whether that's from community development to health and wellbeing, economic development, regeneration, active environments, the natural environment, as well as obviously culture, arts and heritage itself. You'll see from the report that it's based on 4 cultural principles, which then leads into 4 tactics and 7 focus areas. Now, I must say we've worked with a number of different consultants on pulling this together, and you'll see there's both a draft strategy and a draft action plan to bring that to life. This follows on from we practiced what we preached, so we worked with local creatives to go out there and engage with residents on this. So rather than merely putting a survey monkey out, they were out there kind of doing kind of art workshops with communities to kind of help understand what it is that communities most wanted to see culturally in their area. And I'm pleased to say that already we're seeing quite a lot of investment and interest coming from the Arts Council England, where they've identified us as one of their priority places for the country, and that comes about for 2 reasons. One of them being a historical lack of funding into the locality from them, which is not so good, which we're trying to rectify. But importantly, they're also seeing a real drive within the town to see more opportunities for residents, and this draft strategy is plays into that and the importance it plays for our residents. So I welcome any questions people may have. I appreciate it's some meaty documents, but it's very important to say, most of what you see in these documents are Basildon. That's what's happening here. There's a rich heritage of cultural opportunities here, but having a strategy finally will enable our good members to be able to ensure that the appropriate scrutiny is taking place to drive this work forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's good to see this come before us. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Myers.
Thank you. Grant, just based on what you just last said in terms of a particularly meaty document, in terms of how the council performs in delivering the action plan going forwards, do we think that the size and scope of what we're trying to do in a single document actually encompasses the work that we want to do going forwards, or is there an element of separate little action plans we could possibly do to make it more sort of efficient going forwards? Because sometimes you have a very, very meaty document, and sometimes little bits of it and little policies get missed out on what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's always part of the difficulty with creating one document. I mean, I think I would say that that's all really starting. So I'm pleased to say Jim and myself are going to the Prosperity Scrutiny Board relating to Wickford in a couple of weeks to talk about a similar impetus as part of the town team bids for Wickford, and we would expect, I think, to see that across all of the other prospective bid areas as well. So we're really encouraged and really happy to look at this from a place-based perspective. I think in particular, Jim also has been today and has been in the middle of Basildon Tech Festival. So for instance, that's another kind of very kind of clear arm to this work. It would be almost impossible to put that all in one document, but I think you can start to see that there is a significant level of interest and drive for developing this work further and further.
Thank you very much, Grant. So just based on that, with the 7 focus areas we've got, are they all working in tandem, or is there going to be an issue with particularly different workplaces taking a priority on some of them and not doing them together and working them up at the same time?
So I don't foresee that being an issue, but of course, these are live documents. They're not to be put on the shelf, so they need to drive the change that's needed. If we need to, we will, as good practice, we will always do mid-term reviews into this work. What I would say, Councillor, which is really important, is we do not want these to be Basildon Council documents. We want them to be Basildon Borough documents and Basildon Town Centre documents in particular. So this is really important with setting a vision to be able to draw together our partnerships, both internally. I mentioned lots of different services working collaboratively, but to drive the change we need to do, we need to see partners from outside our organisation making this happen. We believe that the draft strategy, should it be adopted at Cabinet next month, sets a real clear scene for how we expect this to drive and support communities. But it will be as large and as big as the support it gets with our partnerships, I must say.
Anybody else have anything? Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, it's a massive document, Grant, and takes a bit of reading, and just getting my head around it. Working with partners, great. I know we've seen some things in the town over the last couple of years with like things made public and that kind of thing. Are there any quick wins for us on this document? Things that can be done pretty quickly, or is it going to be a long, drawn-out process?
So I think we're very lucky to have, independent of the council, we have the Creative Basildon Group who operate through support from Arts Council England under their Creative People and Places scheme. They're out there delivering quite regularly. They had quite an extensive and large programme taking place throughout January over in the old Robin Cinema scheme. They have a new director in place who is now driving a new programme. So I think we'll continue to see opportunities and activities through Creative Basildon. But there's also many conversations going on in relation to the changing nature of the high street and working with other partners there and how we drive more investment into culture. So I think we will see some of those quick wins, but it's going to be a continual drive throughout the life of the strategy, Councillor.
Okay, and also I noticed on page 136, you mentioned Arts Council, you mentioned the National Heritage Lottery Fund. By the way, where it's got there that the Heritage Lottery projects from £3,000, you might be interested to know it's gone up now to £10,000 starting rate. up to millions of pounds. But with these funders, as you're aware, there is quick delivery. You know, some of these projects, like the lottery, may fund you for up to 5 years in certain circumstances. So I'm assuming then with my quick win mode on, that if we were to get some funding from some of these funders, like the lottery, and some sponsorship and the community fund and the British Council and all that kind of thing, I'm assuming then that those will we be managing that delivery? And secondly, that if we are managing the delivery, will that be done in house, or will somebody else be managing those projects?
So not necessarily. I think I think we want this to be a document that's owned by the creatives and the communities of Basildon, but with Basildon Council being a significant player in this space. So my rather poor answer is it might be us, but we might not be the right partner to do that. But what I hope that the strategy sets out is giving clarity around the support, advice, information, and guidance, at least that the council will bring, whether that's in culture, which will traditionally sit with myself, or the creative industries, which I might bring Jim on in a minute to talk a bit very passionately about his work there, and some of the work he's been doing to already support that sector through our UK SPF funding. Jim, can I pass over to you?
Yeah, happy to. I think, Councillor Lawrence, one of the things that is clear about placemaking, for example, how do we make Basildon a fizzy and sticky place that people want to come and live, work and play in. In kind of my experience, places that have a kind of vibrant cultural social economy, and by that I mean organisations like Things Made Public or a music development agency, or why is it that we don't have a kind of indigenous meanwhile use agency that's looking at kind of taking over empty spaces and turning them into kind of animated spaces for creatives. I think all the research kind of indicates that we've got a relatively low number of cultural, social organisations, social ventures that are working in that space. So some of the work that we're trying to do is about stimulating the social economy, particularly around the kind of cultural dimension. And so that is an example of where I think, to your question about do we do that or is it about somebody else doing that, I think our job is to kind of facilitate the market, not just consider everything to be a kind of council-run or delivered piece of activity. It's about trying to create the agencies that can bid for money and deliver interesting activities in the town centre. So we're focusing on some of that through our UK Shared Prosperity Fund at the moment. And obviously, as you know, we've done the Robin Cinema project and, Creative Business Advisor stuff as well. So really trying to grow the capacity of the market, I think.
I also wanted to add that I'm very pleased to say, since we've made a good head start on this, so we are tracking the amount of money coming into the borough, either directly to the council, to the theatre, or to local creatives through Arts Council England. And I'm pleased to say there's more money flying. We're seeing a very clear upward trend, and there's been more money flown into the borough over the last 2 years than in any period prior that was recorded. So this is seeing growth, but as I say, we hope that the strategy supercharges that work and normalises the work, of course.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think for me, one of the greatest aspects of this is that relationship building and that formalising of these types of conversations. I think a couple of years ago it was a very, very different deal. If you look at some of the things that have been happening, just through these types of conversations, trying to put these types of things together, it shows that we as a borough are serious. It's not our job to get out there and be arty and do this, but it might be our job as a council or as councillors to convene this and make these things possible and then get out of the way and let people do it for themselves. I think of all of the things that we can be really, really, really proud of. I mean, we had the National Gallery bring a fantastic and beautiful painting, and it was the most obscure thing because so many people fed back to me that well, I'm very surprised you're letting children in there, and actually that was the greatest way of engaging with that. You have this painting painted from a famous master's memory of his walk to school, and that's exactly the conversations we then have with multiple primary schools in the area and ask children to depict and describe and draw and demonstrate what they see on their journey to school. I think it was a fantastic engaging thing. It also introduced entire population to art that they might never have had the opportunity to see. I don't think it's this council's job to tell people what to do when it comes to the arts. We've got a very, very rich history with arts. But that's a history we have to plot for a future, and I think our relationships and those conversations, I can't tell you how many different Zoom calls we've been on with various different creative consultants in various different things, and how many times we've gone to this meeting or that exhibition or whatever. To have a strategy and to have an action plan come out of that, I think is a very, very powerful document. And it proves to our partners, people like the Arts Council, that actually, you know what, we do mean it. It wasn't just a fluke. You didn't come and see something great and think, we'll get behind this. You're a focus for us. We do mean it. We do have a plan. And actually, we want a little bit of the public telling us what they want rather than us telling them. So I think this is a great piece of work. Our officers have put in fantastic efforts. And so have our community partners as well. So thank you.
I couldn't have said that better myself, Councillor Henry. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, we've got to be very grateful for the amount of money we've now coming into the borough, and that's something we want to continue to strive for and to attract. And I can only see a strategy like that improving the outcomes to that. So has anybody else got anything to say? Councillor Yacoub.
I think a strategy like this, it ties in with regeneration, it ties in with the work that we've been doing on the Basildon narrative. And I think it is quite complex when you think about Basildon as having a cultural identity, because in a way these are kind of ideas that we've pursued as a council, working with other organisations. But we know that there is this constant struggle of tackling the perception of Basildon. And I think young people are a great opportunity for us in terms of reshaping what Basildon looks like or what Basildon could be. On one of the pages here, it says that in the South Essex College workshops, there were 89% of students who felt that they didn't think they could pursue their dream job in Basildon, which is a concern. And I think, you know, this piece of work is what we need, but we need to be careful that we're not kind of preaching to residents, this is what Basildon is and this is what Basildon can be, but also it needs to be an approach where that vision of what Basildon can be culturally is being defined collectively.
Anybody else got anything to say?
I would just, I mean, Jim, I don't want to set you up here, but that's a startling fact that consultation. You know, we can't hide away from that. But again, you know, Jim's had we listen, we talk, we think about it. The UKSPF has been a very meaningful way to be able to tackle Basildon issues and to equalise that. So the work that Jim and his team and other partners have been doing over the last week around the Tech Festival, I would really hope that when we ask that question again in a couple of years, we see a significant change. So I just wanted to give the assurance that we don't just look at a stat like that, and we're not hiding away from that. We have to make it so as our children and young people feel that they can fulfil their ambitions in Basildon, and that's a significant drive for all of us, I can promise you.
Right, anybody else got any comments on this item? No? Thank you very much then. So, matters of consideration that People's Scrutiny Committee are invited to review and comment on the draft culture and creative industry strategy as set out in enclosures 22-23 prior to its consideration by Cabinet. That is noted. Right, on to item 8, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we're presenting the annual safeguarding review report this evening. I'm sure that all of you in the room are aware that the council have a statutory duty to protect and refer adults with care and support needs and children at risk of harm to the appropriate social care agencies. I think it's important to just be clear about what that actually means, is that the council are not responsible for carrying out any investigations or inputting any actions in order to protect individuals. Our duty is mainly about identifying concerns and making the appropriate referrals. So there's a bit of a distinct difference there. So we just need to sort of clarify that our duty is more about making the appropriate referrals when we identify things that would fall within the safeguarding remit. So we also have a duty to respond to requests for information. So social care, the police, a number of different agencies may get involved in carrying out investigations in order to protect adults, vulnerable adults or children at risk of harm. And they will send out what are called Section 17 and Section 47 notices to a range of different agencies, the council being one of those. And we have to respond to that and provide any information that we hold about that adult or that child, or any interactions that we've had with that. So we do receive a number of those, which are included in the report there for your information. We do regularly review our policies and procedures. We're fully compliant with we work with the Essex Adult Social Safeguarding Board and the Essex Children Safeguarding Board, and we produce an annual assessment to those organisations, and we do comply with all the guidance that they set out for local authorities and other agencies in terms of their safeguarding duty. But we do regularly make sure that our policies and procedures are up to date with any new guidance that is produced. So the purpose of the actual annual review that we carry out is to just make sure that we are carrying out it's about looking at trends, it's about looking at are we following our procedures, are we doing all the things that we should be doing around those safeguarding duty. So, and there's a full report there that I won't go into the detail. It's got lots of facts and figures, but they're quite self-explanatory. But in summary, from the numbers that we've got recorded, we continue to report a similar level of referrals as in previous years. What is slightly different this year is that about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we actually had an internal audit carried out on our safeguarding procedures. And one of the recommendations that came out of that audit was that because every service in the council is responsible for their own safeguarding referrals, but within my team, we have a safeguarding officer who monitors all of those safeguarding referrals that we make across the whole council. And I think it was identified that what we really needed to be able to do was to have some evidence to prove that all the referrals that were reported through the safeguarding officer were the same number of referrals that were actually being reported to the relevant agencies. And I think what I just need to explain a little bit about that is that an individual service area has to do the safeguarding referral themselves. It can't be done by a safeguarding officer because they have to input information directly onto a portal. So it's not like you're just filling in a form and you're sending it off. You have to actually go into either the adult safeguarding portal or the child safeguarding portal with Essex County Council. So they have to fill in that information directly online. And if they're the person that's either witnessed the concern or it's their service area that's responsible for that, then they need to input that. But our procedures state that they need to inform the safeguarding officer that they've done that referral. And the reason for that is that enables us to monitor that we're getting feedback on those referrals and that we can then close them down to say actually that case has been dealt with. Now, what the audit identified is that we weren't at that time doing that compliance check to check that that was actually what was happening. So last year, in April, we did a cross-service compliance check. And what we did identify is that actually there were more safeguarding referrals being made than actually were being reported through the safeguarding officer. So that in itself is actually quite positive, in that it does mean that actually the level of safeguarding referrals that we've made is higher than we were reporting. And so it means that staff are aware of their responsibilities and they're fulfilling that responsibility. But what they failed to do is to follow the actual internal procedure that we've got and to inform the safeguarding officer that that's happened. So we've taken a little bit of time before we've presented the report back through this route, in order to make sure that we've put some procedures in place to mitigate that and to make sure that that won't happen, or that doesn't happen again in the future. So what we've done is that I've spoken at length with our heads of service colleagues. We've analysed where some of those gaps were happening. We've done some additional training in the teams where there was the discrepancies. And we've made sure that they are fully aware of those safeguarding procedures. We've also identified a safeguarding champion now that sits within every single service area. And that safeguarding champion is going to receive some additional training. So all members of staff within the council receive a basic level of training. It's a mandatory training that we monitor. But what will happen, but there are certain officers within the council that have more advanced level safeguarding training. So, for example, I'm the lead safeguarding officer. So myself and Julie Long, who's the ASB Community Safety Manager, both have got an advanced training around that. But there are other training levels within that. So there's a level 2 type training that we can deliver for staff as well. So our champions will all receive that slightly higher level of training. And what they will now be doing is that they will be the key link back to the safeguarding officer. And that will enable us to escalate information out to the teams, but also make sure that they are monitoring and keeping a record of any safeguarding referrals that take place within their service area, so that we can make sure that we're doing that cross-check compliance around that. I thought I'd just explain that in a little bit more detail, because that's the only sort of slight change within the annual report that we're presenting this evening. So it is important that, from a governance point of view, that safeguarding performance and the duty is highlighted at a senior, within the senior leadership of the organisation. So it has been presented, as I said, to our heads of service forum. It has gone to our senior leadership team, and I've also had a discussion with Councillor Sargent, who is the lead member of safeguarding, and we've discussed the report in some detail. And obviously it's coming to the forum this evening, really for your information and for any comments that you may have around that. But it's also to bring it to your attention as well, in terms of that safeguarding function and responsibility. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Elaine. That's very good news to hear that the governance is kind of increasing now. There's going to be extra training. Has that happened now, or is it?
We're just arranging that with the provider. We do it through the Essex boards, with the Essex County Council. So we're just getting that in place at the moment, but that will be happening very shortly. But we have identified all the champions, so we have got those all set up. They've had I think they've had their first meeting. They know what's happening, so it will be happening shortly, the training.
Thank you, lovely, good to hear. I just had a comment, and I wondered if you could explain any sort of potential reasons behind it. On page 154, where we've got referrals by postcode, there seems to be quite a high number from SS14 and SS13. Is there any particular reason why those two particular postcodes within the borough we're seeing a lot more referrals by percentage than elsewhere in the borough?
I'm making some assumptions here, so you'd have to sort of bear that in mind. But I think you would probably find, if you looked at some of the census data, that those particular postcodes are some of the postcodes that have got the highest areas of deprivation, and I think it's try to say this in the nicest way, but sometimes where there are high areas of poverty and there's lots of deprivation, we tend to find that might be where, certainly where children might be experiencing more environments that could be putting them at risk. And I think we also have a number of, we'll have particularly because some of that is in and around the town centre. So where we've got single occupancy type accommodation, so where you might have some one-bedroom high-rise, one-bedroom flats, where you might have a lot of that density of accommodation, you might find that there's going to be more vulnerable adults in those sorts of environments as well. And I think particularly in the town centre, or in and around the town centre, we find that we get lots of safeguarding referrals around particularly vulnerable adults that may be being cuckooed. So that might be, they're being exploited really around drug use and drug abuse and those sorts of things. So, and I think it's more to do with the location and the environment, and then those vulnerable people migrating to the town centre type areas, and then that's where sometimes that gets picked up as well.
Councillor Lawrence.
Hi, Elaine. I just want to mention about the. I want to find out if you say that you refer.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm a safeguarding lead in my organisation, and so people refer whatever to me at times, and I deal with Essex as well, on a smaller scale to what the council does. But the procedures and all that are all the same. Is there any way that you or us as a council, when we do referrals, do we know if other people like the police, those type of agencies, if they've already referred? Is there any sort of synergy between us and other agencies?
Technically, no, because the way that social care will always train people is to say that they'd rather have more reports than none at all. So that's really for the social care team to then bring any of those reports all together. So we don't actually know when we make a referral whether any other agency has already made that referral or not. And we wouldn't necessarily get any feedback directly from Essex Social Care to say that there's been a referral from somewhere else. In fact, we get very limited information that actually comes back from the referrals that are made. It will be just that they've investigated and they've either taken some action or they've closed the case with no further action. However, you probably are well aware that we have a very, very, very good multi-agency partnership working in Basildon, and we do have a number of forums where we may discuss certain situations or certain individuals, and as a part of that there are opportunities to understand that other agencies may have supported or be involved in safeguarding concerns as well. So there is, we have to be careful about data protection, and we have to be very careful about that sensitive, the sharing of that sensitive information. But it is something that we are very conscious of and very aware of in some of the forums and meetings that we do go along to.
Does anybody else have any other comments on this item? Councillor Yacoub?
Just a quick question. It says here that 3% of safeguarding referrals originate from housing services when it comes to children. How does that work with schools? Do we have a percentage on how many safeguarding referrals come from schools?
We wouldn't be aware of that because schools would make their own individual safeguarding concerns directly to Essex County Council Social Care. So we wouldn't be informed or advised of that information. I'm sure Essex County Council would have that data and would have that information, but as a local council, we wouldn't be privy to that information.
Anybody else? Anything to add to this? Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Elaine for her excellent presentation. I think she's made it extremely clear this council's processes, policies and procedures that we have in place to deal with safeguarding, because it's an extremely important subject. And I'm pleased that there was an internal audit. As always, they flesh out problems, issues, and we can overcome them, which we most undoubtedly have done. I just wanted, the final thing I just wanted to say was, when I had my discussion with Elaine, I spoke about members, because we used to have safeguarding training, and we have surgeries. Members of the council come into contact with our constituents or members of the public. In fact, we could even, somebody could disclose to us. And it's about us knowing how we, in turn, would make that referral, and obviously go through the council team of officers who are the safeguarding leads, etc. So, and Elaine will take that on board. It's probably too late now for this year, but I think with the elections coming up, after those, there could be quite a number of new councillors and obviously established councillors, and I think that we would benefit from that training too. So thanks very much, Elaine, and I'm sure that once we get the training, we will benefit too. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, anybody else? Anything else on this item? Thank you very much for that report, and we'll now move on to item 9.
Thank you, Chair. So the Council's current consultation engagement policy was approved back in October of 2021, and following that we developed the consultation engagement strategy 2022 to 24, which is the subject of this evening's report. Just by way of an introduction to the strategy, it's focused around 3 key themes, which are capability, accessibility and transparency. So what we were trying to do with the strategy, in terms of capability, is to broaden the pool of officers able to undertake basic consultation exercises and deepen the skills available centrally to the organisation, and to ensure that we can meet future demand. In terms of accessibility, we wanted to open up consultation and engagement to ensure as many potential participants can easily engage as they wish to do so. And through the transparency theme, we wanted to share the data and analysis from consultations to promote openness so that participants and other interested parties can hold the council to account. So from that, the strategy contains 5 priority areas, and within that there were a number of actions, 21 to be specific. I've provided a short update against each of those actions just so you can see how much progress has been made. 14 of those actions have now been completed, and there are 6 that are ongoing. Of those 6, 1 I believe can move to business as usual, and that relates to how we go about publishing consultation and engagement information now. 3 of the actions are moving over to the Data and Insight Network to be progressed further. 1 will be delivered through the actions relating to the engagement review, which I'll come on to shortly. 1 will be delivered later this summer, which relates to the tracker survey. Now, if you're happy, I'll pause there before I go on to the engagement review, if there's any specific questions that you may have before I proceed.
Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then with regards to the engagement review, this arose as an outcome really from developing the consultation and engagement policy and strategy. It became evident although we know that we do lots of engagement across the council, there isn't as much of a structured approach to it, so it wasn't documented as well, but we knew that it was happening.
So an engagement review was undertaken to find out exactly what was going on across the organisation so we could address any knowledge gaps, identify best practice and look at basically how we could capture what's going on across the organisation. So a number of recommendations arose from that review, which are listed in the document here. There's 9 to be specific. And those actions are going to be implemented between now up till December 2024. What we found was that what was needed was to document our approach to engagement. So we know lots and lots of good work's going on, but we just need a little bit more of a framework around that so that best practice could be shared across the organisation and deployed in the right ways. We also wanted to make sure that officers had the same level of support to undertake engagement as they do with consultation, which is much more formal in terms of how it's delivered. And we wanted to ensure that the findings from engagement fed back into the organisation so they improve service delivery to our residents, to stakeholders, business partners and such like. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. I'll hand over to yourself. Thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Not a question as such, just a comment. Obviously, we've some members may have been here, some members may not have been, depending on sort of substitutes, etc. But we've had the policy and the strategy both come before this committee over the last year and a half or so. So it's quite nice to see that a lot of the actions coming out of that strategy have now been implemented. As we discussed and scrutinised a few months ago, so I'm quite happy to see that most of the progress has been done, and as you mentioned, a lot of the ongoing stuff is nearly complete by the end of this year. So that's good work. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other comments? No. Thank you very much for the report. We'll move on now to item 10, the work programme. Is there any comments going forward on the work programme? No? Okay, thank you very much everybody for your attendance this evening. Thank you very much officers.